Harlem is a part of who I am. I actually have an apartment in Harlem now and also spend time in New Jersey, but Harlem is really who I am, my ethos. And the fund is named after 125th Street, where the Apollo is, where some of the great entertainers have performed. Record Park, and you mentioned my godfather, Al Hartman. He was the first Black sports reporter at the New York Times when he joined in 1968. He was there until 2004. And he passed away a couple years ago, but really when I was launching the fund, he was my inspiration.
Hello, everyone. This is Mike Ma. I am the host of Alone Together, and then I'm sometimes managing partner of Sidecut Ventures. I am so excited for this conversation to have Lorine Pendleton from 125 Ventures on. And the reason it's purely selfish. The reason I'm excited to this, Lorine and I have hung around. If you're on the circuit, you run into the same people over and over again, but it's really the conversations are what you can get through and like a glass of wine or a cocktail or an hors d'oeuvre or between a conference, between things. And Lorine, even in those short times, is someone I've respected immensely professionally for how what she's done in her previous venture life and how she's bringing into a new venture, just being a person. But this is the first time I get to have just proper Lorine time. So that's why I'm so excited to have you on the pod. You were one of the first people I WhatsApped with. I was like, hey, I'm going to start a pod. I know you're thinking about doing some other stuff too. And I'm so honored that you that you said yes and wanted to hang out with me. So thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. And I remember we met last summer and just really liked you. I thought you were really an incredible person and also loved what you were doing at your fund and your thesis. And so I'm really honored that you would have me on your pod.
For sure. And there's so much I want to talk about. I mean, I'm a huge sports nerd. You rep Cleveland, you rep New York. I rep Cleveland pretty hard, but maybe just start with me, let's just start from the top and we're going to work backwards in your history, but tell us a little bit about you and 125 or 125 Ventures. I don't know. How do you actually phrase it? I know it's an homage to 125th Street.
Yeah, 125. Yeah, so 125 Ventures is what we call it.
So give us a quick rundown for those who don't know.
Yeah, sure.
And have the benefit of your story.
Great. Yeah. So 125 Ventures, I'm the founder and managing partner. We are $25 million fund investing in sports with a particular focus on women's sports, media, and entertainment at the intersection of tech. So we're really a tech fund, but in those sectors that I mentioned. So a couple areas we're focusing on, as I mentioned, women's sports, the rise of women's sports, just the growth of women's sports has changed, projected to go 300% through 2030. AI and data analytics. I'm an investor in Oura Ring. I made an angel investment in Oura Ring about 5 years ago, which has been a great investment. So it's really a data analytics play. And then also name, image, likeness, college athletics. So when you think about what's happening, the changes in the recent NCAA antitrust lawsuit, where now student athletes can make money and monetize their name, image, likeness. There's a ton of companies that are focused on that and that ecosystem. And then the other area is the creator economy, fandom, communities. I've made investments in that space in my previous fund. And creator economy, now that you have Forbes magazine with the list of the top creator economies, top 50, we've definitely, it's become a viable business and industry. It's growing. So there's going to be opportunities around that. And the last area is live and immersive events. So think of Sphere, think of Cosme or Cosm, I should say, Cosm, which is like a mini sphere where you can watch, you can watch games, but it's hyper immersive. And so you're going to have some really great companies that are doing stuff around live and immersive events, which I think is the last bastion before AI, kind of takes over everything. When you have, I don't know about you, but I don't want to see robots running up and down the field. And I think, concerts, I think people want to hear Taylor Swift original songs, see her in concerts or Beyonce. So live and immersive events are going to be, I think, the last area where we won't have AI taking over.
It's such an awesome fund and such an awesome thesis. If people didn't know you, right, they would say you could see how someone be a pessimist and say oh, they're cherry picking women's sports and NIL and Sphere and immersive. But, I know you, right. And I know all that stuff comes from the heart.
Comes from the heart,
Like,
but also the opportunity. There's disruption across all those areas. All of those, have some type of disruption. And when there's disruption, there's opportunity. And so really when I launched the fund, really looked to take a step back and looked at where did I think was going to be the biggest opportunities. And those are the opportunities that I think will be the biggest opportunity. Also, my background, in which I can kind of jump to the right to it. So
I
I'm a former
do.
media and entertainment lawyer. So I worked in this industry around working with creative talent, and all of that whole industry has been disrupted. If you think about just even not too long ago, people would have cable. I don't even have cable. I just stream. I use Netflix, Amazon, YouTube TV, and I cut the cable cord 5 years ago. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And so if you look at media rights, before it was like traditional broadcasters would have media rights. Now you've got Netflix, you've got Amazon, you've got YouTube now, acquiring media rights. And so all of these things are being disrupted because of technology. And so, I think I have a unique lens being a former media entertainment lawyer, understanding when there's regulatory regulations or new case law that leads to opportunity. And so being on the ahead of the curve and understanding where things are headed is really important.
Can I even extend that further? Right. So, we kind
Sure.
of work backwards from, 1, 2, 5
Sorry.
features. No, 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 no. I want to even go further. Like, and, doing a lot of the, research on you, which is weird to do research on someone I feel like I know well, but, um, I would love to talk about just and see if we can build, or if you can let the viewers kind of know the through line from that, starting from growing up in Harlem, 125th Street. Like, the story and the vision I have is you going to the Yankees game with your godfather, the first black sports writer for the
New York
Times, right?
Times. Yeah.
Like, can you just can you fill us in on Lorine, the person, the child, the one
Yeah.
going up on the B? Were you East Side or West Side? B or D?
No, West Side. It was
West Side. So
overlooking
you're coming
right
up the
right
B.
off of by the FDR Drive, yeah. Near the
So
FDR
so
Drive on the
so so
West
so
Harlem.
yeah. So can you talk about that and growing up, and how, a little bit about growing up in Harlem, and then how, what you think characteristically has informed you as an investor?
Yeah, so I grew up in Harlem, actually until I was 10. So kind of the first part of my life, I grew up in Harlem. My parents are both Harlemites, were born and raised, and they left to go to Teaneck when I was 10, and we, then moved into a house. But Harlem is a part of who I am. I actually have an apartment in Harlem now and also spend time in New Jersey, but Harlem is really who I am, my ethos. And the fund is named after 125th Street, where the Apollo is, where some of the great entertainers have performed. Rucker Park. If
Rucker.
people are basketball fans, Rucker Park was like where people would play street ball, and some of the basketball greats have come out of Rucker Park. And so when I was thinking about my fund, what inspired me, it's my roots. And you mentioned my godfather, Al Harvin. He was the first Black sports reporter at the New York Times when he joined in 1968. He was there until 2004. And he passed away a couple years ago. But really, when I was launching the fund, he was my inspiration, because I remember as a kid, I would, we lived right, it's at West Harlem, but it's right off the FDR Drive. And,
Ooh.
you can see Yankee Stadium from our apartment, and the stadium would light up, the lights would light up, and I really wanted to go. And so my godfather said, "Hey, come with me. You're going to sit in the press box. You can't root for the team. We have to be impartial." And that was the first time I really got exposed to sports in that way, in a live event. You have people, all kinds of people, Black, white, Latino, Asian, all kinds of people, young, older, men, women. And I saw the power of sports and people rooting for the home team. So, I may get some of your viewers upset, but I'm a lifelong Yankee fan because of that experience. And I was exposed at a young age to the New York Yankees. I'll never be a Mets fan. Obviously, we have a rivalry with the Boston Red Sox. But the point is, though, whether you root for the Yankees or not, it informed me seeing sports, this just how people were unified around sports. And when we moved to Teaneck, I got into sports. I ran track and I played basketball all through high school. From there, I learned the power of sports and just like the resiliency, the teamwork, and was always a sports fan. And I think that's really important, what I'm doing, but also it's the business of sports, technology, and all these things, the intersection of sports, and all these things are related. And so, yeah, that's, my kind of my early roots, and Harlem is a part of me. I think my parents came from absolutely nothing. My dad went to, college at night and then NYU, got his computer engineering degree. And so I'm a product of Harlem. I saw the, working hard and you can get out of Harlem, but actually I'm in Harlem and Harlem is completely gentrified and it's, a really great place to go. When my friends come from out of town, now they want to go to Harlem. So we definitely have turned a corner, but it's just a great community.
It's funny you talk about sports and everyone's a sports fan, but I think your advantage, and now I have this image of you in the press box, this little girl in the press box. Do you think that changes your perspective as an investor, being a fan versus spending some time? And I never thought about this for now. Like everything I know about sports was I grew up in a much less rich sports culture from a winning perspective. I was at Municipal Stadium watching the then Indians play in a 70,000 person stadium with 3,000 people heckling Mark Hargrove. But I learned it in the stands. You learned it. I mean, you had some vantage in the press. I'm just curious, does that change your perspective at all?
I don't know if it changes my perspective. I just think as an investor, I think you need to use whatever edge you have. I think also you need to be passionate about what you're investing in. You need to be a perpetual student of the industries that you're investing in. And the fact that I love sports, certainly is helpful. But, at the end of the day, I'm investing to make money for my investors and also obviously for myself. But, I think understanding sports, media, entertainment, like these industries you're investing in is really important. And so, I think not just me, obviously was exposed to sports. I played sports, doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be a great investor. I think what makes someone a great investor is like understanding where the ball is going to go, I guess, pun intended or no pun intended, but where the ball is going to go next. And I remember even in my startup days, which we can get to more in my background, I remember when Netflix launched and disrupted, Blockbuster and DVDs. And, I invested in Netflix when it first was publicly traded. And I did not expect for them to become a streaming giant, but they were definitely a disruptor. And so there's other stories about things that I came across and just said, wow, this is really a disruptor. And I think that's what a good investor is just kind of figuring out where the ball is headed and investing in that, where the ball is headed. And also when other people maybe ignore it or don't see it.
Yeah. So maybe then talk about like your foray into investing. And we share. You've referenced that you Pipeline Angels and you read Daily Worth and Amanda is a friend of mine.
Oh,
I mean,
wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
yeah. So Amanda's a friend. I mean, she's been all over now. Can you walk through the transition of this idea when you started moving from your other parts of your career, lawyer, et cetera, into investing? Can you walk about that transition
Sure.
into like becoming an angel and learning about it to raising your own fund? I mean, your other funds
Sure. For 125.
before one
Yeah,
two.
great question. So this has been a fun in the making for over a decade. And how I got into investing, I was still working at law firm. I wasn't practicing. I was heading up business development at a big global law firm. And, what I would say is I knew there was much more than what I was doing. I was destined to do something that really I was passionate about. And I was at home. I'll never forget. It was like a Sunday afternoon. I'm at home and there was a show on Soledad O'Brien, Black in America. And she was basically had a show on different topics. So she had one on healthcare, the disparity in healthcare and African Americans. The next one was about entrepreneurship. And it was, this accelerator program that was African American founders went out to Silicon Valley, and she said a stat that less than 1% of VC dollars went to Black founders. And I remember literally stopping in my tracks, and I was like, "Wow, that's really unsettling." And sure enough, I researched it and saw that was the case. And then also less than 2% of VC went to women founders. And I said at that moment, I want to change that. I didn't know how. And then this is where Amanda and Daily Worth comes into play. I put it out in the universe. I wanted to change that. And then literally I would get, so Daily Worth was a newsletter that came out daily every day. focus on topics around targeting women, talking about financial topics or, financials, finances. And in that newsletter, 3 weeks later, she interviewed this woman, Natalia, who was a founder of Pipeline Angels. And Pipeline Angels was a boot camp to train women become angel investors with the hopes that if we have more women who are angel investors, more women, diverse led companies would get funding. So closing the funding gap. I applied. I said, this is exactly what I need. I applied, I got in, and that started my angel investing journey. And I graduated from that program 11 years ago. So I started making angel investment checks and then realized you need to make like 20, 30 investments like a fund, diversification, right?
Yep.
And that tends to add up, right?
Yep.
If you're
Preach.
writing five to
Preach.
$25,000 check, it's like, whoa, okay. So someone in my cohort from Pipeline Angels told me a portfolio, which was founded by Trish Costello, who is launched the Kauffman Foundation program, which trains some of the top VCs in the world to this day. But she was basically wanted to create a platform where she could get more women as angel investors investing in funds, and then also create a platform that emerging managers can learn from her, create a fund and invest. And so create a track record because she was finding a lot of the people who went through her program who were women, people of color, were hitting glass ceilings. They go back to their funds and weren't getting promoted to partner. And so she said, VC's broken. She's like, there's some great investors out there because they're women, because they're diverse, or whatever it is, you know, they have a certain lens. They don't have a blind spot. And so she's created a company to help those fund managers to invest money, raise money, and invest it. And so I convinced her to do my first fund, Rising America, which was investing in underrepresented founders. And then we went on and did a fund two. But our Rising America Fund One is the best performing fund out of 15 funds that Portfolio has done. We have a net IRR of 31%, which puts us in the top 5% of all venture capital funds, vintage year 2020. We got into deals like Madison Reed, which is the hair coloring company, consumer package company, now did a series D or E, done really well. Canela Media, now it's the second largest Latin streaming or Latin media company. We were the first investors. Valuation was 10 million. It's 40x increase. Some really great companies. And so that's how I started my fundraising, my investment journey. And I decided last year to launch my own fund.
Yeah. So, I mean, before we got on the air, we were just, off air, just kind of kibitzing a little bit of how hard it is. I mean, I ran a fund before, right? And had same angel portfolio, about a couple dozen in my portfolio, in my angel portfolio, et cetera. Like, and you have those numbers, right? And those are huge. If you don't know, now you know, like those are massive numbers. But keeping it real, like it's still hard. It's hard for you and hard for me. And we're talking about sizing and closing and we're both, I'm very thankful that we're out hustling because it's the reason I get to see you. But at the same time, we're about that hustling. So I'm just curious, friend to friend, and for other people listening in, like, why is it so hard, when you have the track record that you have, and I, whatever I have, you can toss that for whatever it's worth. Why is it still hard out there? I mean, and I'm just curious if you have like a plain speak thought about it, about how is it translating?
Yeah, I think it's always going to be hard to raise money, whether you have a track record or not. It's just hard. There's a lot more venture capital funds that are out there. I was reading Silicon Valley SVB. They put out a state of venture report, and something like I forget the quote, but pretty much something like 90% of the venture, from investors have gone to big institutional VC funds. So it's something like a concentration of like 10, like who've gotten the most money, 10 of them, and they're large, large funds, which squeezes out emerging managers like you and me. Not to say that we can't raise money or can't close, it just makes it a lot harder. Also, where we are in the market, we're in a VC winter. We had, years of like a lot of growth. There was a lot of money sloshing around. So people have like, maybe have over allocated in venture. We haven't had a lot of the liquidity events that we've had in the past, like M&A, IPO market has slowed. And so investors, particularly institutional investors, even family offices, they're waiting to get distributions. And so, they don't have the liquidity that they would have, and frankly, there's a lot of money on the sidelines just waiting. And so, I think it's never easy to raise, but also you have to look at market conditions and where you are in the market, and that's where we are right now. So I think this was the worst time for me to start a fund, but I think about my basketball, my track days. It builds resiliency. I tell people I eat no's for breakfast. I've never had no said to me so many times in my life. And when I first started, I would take it personally. And now it's like, okay, are you going to invest or you're not? Like get to the answer pretty quickly and move on and don't waste my
Yeah.
time. And you just have to have resiliency. You just have to keep doing it. You have to have your storytelling. Why should someone invest in you? You have to differentiate yourself. And so it's hard, but I would say I think about when I was in law firm days, some days I hated going to work. I get up, I come to my office, it's not always easy when you're getting rejected constantly, but I know that I'm doing something that I'm passionate about. And really what I want to do is get money to amazing founders. And that's incredible.
Yeah. Can you break some of this down for me and for the other people? Those are the standard objections, right? Bad winter. Hey, I got wild in 2021, 22. I'm waiting for distributions. Can you walk us through just, without naming any specific LP, but like, what do you say when you have the right LP? Like, I'm sure you've been in rooms playing like, no, you need to be an LP in my fund. I would love to get tactical. Like, what do you say? How do you overcome that, get people over that hurdle? And I do think that a lot of these hurdles are psychological or you can be pushed through. And at the same time, there's the other end of the spectrum, which is, you know what, not the right thing for you.
Yeah.
I will take my wares and move on. How do you differentiate that? And then when you want to bear down and compel someone or convince or influence or whatever, I'm really curious, what do you say or what moves do you make for the other GPs or aspiring GPs that are in the room?
It's
Please.
hard. I think here's the thing. I think a pivot has happened in terms of how I view these things. It's like it's sales and not in a like kind of tacky, gross way, but you know, at the end of the day, you have to have a certain amount of, pipeline and you work people through the funnel. And yes, it's sales. But each person that you're talking to, you need to understand what's important for them. So if it's a family office, family offices typically are focused on wealth preservation. Now, there could have been a liquidity event. They now have a family office or it's built on a big business. And so for them, it's like, there's a stat within 3 generations, the money is gone. And so for family offices, wealth preservation is really, really important. And so, and so that may mean they're not like swinging for the fence that they need like a 30% return. It may mean, as long as I'm preserving my wealth, it's above like, rate of inflation. We're able to live off of like what we what we make. So you want to talk to them about why maybe investing in sports tech, the growing, you talk about the market, it's a growing market, projected particularly women's perhaps go 300%. Here are some of the pain points, like, kind of here are some of the problems that exist in this category, and here are some of the solutions and, the possibility for growth. And so you want to kind of, by investing in this, you're only putting part of, obviously you have asset diversification, but that part that you have, maybe it's like 5% of your portfolio is going to go into VC. This is going to help you with your wealth preservation. Institutional investors there's different personas, right? And so you have to understand what's important. And even with that, if you meet one family office, you met one
Meet
family
one family
office.
office.
It's
Yeah.
not, so
Yeah.
one family may be focused on X, the other may be looking at investing. There's a family office I spoke to, and they are looking to invest basically in women and women GPs and women-led companies because that's important to them. And so, obviously they want to get the best, right? So, every investor, you have to get to the root of like what is important for them
Yeah.
and why so once you can establish that, how then by them investing in you will achieve their goal.
Yeah.
And so, and it doesn't, I mean, look, it doesn't always work, but I think, it's like, you have to understand your audience and your market.
Yeah. Oh, what have you even found about well, forget LPs for a second. What made you want to do this on your own as a solo GP, like versus you're very well connected. I read one of the 50 most well connected, I think, women in business. I forget exact title.
Yeah,
You're
very
incredibly well
clear.
connected.
Yeah, that was
So
a while ago.
sorry for flubbing your accolades, but everyone who knows you knows.
No, 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 no. I'm just a, yeah,
Why'd you want to do this alone for someone who's so well connected? Like, what? Talk to me about the idea to go on your own, because
great
it
question.
ain't easy,
No, I did not want to do it alone.
really.
No. But here's the thing, it's a marriage. And like you're if you're gonna get in a marriage relationship, you can't just marry anyone. And there were a couple people I spoke to who I knew. And when it came down to it, like just like our, what we were, just the way we would go about things, or just, decided that this was not going to be a fit. And so, I'm a very collaborative person. I like working with other people. My two funds, I had partners and they all went off and did their own funds, and they are all solo GPs. So that's interesting. So I just decided I'm going to do it on my own. And I'm like, this is the thesis I want. Look, if someone comes around today and says, we love what you're doing and want to partner with you, it would depend on who it is, and do the due diligence. I would be open to it. But at some point, it's like I can spend time trying to find the perfect partner, which, I did for a year and it didn't work out, or let me just launch the thing and do it. And if that right partner comes along, or, eventually, fine, I'm open to it. But, I'm not going to wait for Godot. It's just like make it happen. What I would say is, because I'm a solo GP, it was really important for me to bring in amazing advisors and a venture partner. So one of my venture partners, Heidi Diamond, she's a former
Yeah.
president of Martha Stewart Living. She launched a Food Network, Scripps launched a Food Network, and executive Nickelodeon. She has like literally been in the media business for 20 plus years. She knows media industry like the back of her hand. Brought in Crystal Fisher. She was an executive at NBC Sports. She's now head of strategy at FanDuel. Before that, she worked at Disney, and then she started a career after graduating from Wharton Business School at Houlihan Lokey, which is the number one media entertainment telecom investment bank. And then Brett Johnson went to college with him. He has his own family office. He was a president of Targus, which is like computer accessory company. He was able to have an M&A transaction with that, start his family office. He owns 3 soccer teams. So he's also an investor in directing companies. I got into Oura Ring. I'm an investor in Oura Ring through Brett. He brought the opportunity to me. I invested in them about 5 years ago. And so he's made a ton of investments, Athletic Brewing, yeah, some really great investments. And then the soccer team, Rhode Island Football Club, and the new stadium, which I'm an investor in both. And we're launching a women's team in Rhode Island, a USL Super League team in August of 2026. So I'll be minority owner in that. And so it was important for me to have a really kick butt team. And that's, you know, I believe in collaboration. I think, you can't do it alone. And so that was really important for me.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that, again, hence the gimmicky title of this podcast. Like, I think there's a perception that we're like lone wolves out there. It does take a village. You don't have to go into the particulars of any particular sale, but how do you convince people to help you, right? And that resume is incredibly kick-ass for all of them. But what does that ask look like to get people who are so accomplished to help you on this mission?
So for 2 of them, I had existing relationships. I've known Heidi for like 6 years, and Brett I've known for a long time, and also was an investor in what he was doing and believed in him. And, you know, I this is a relationship business, and what that means is you don't just take, it's a give and take. And I always try to help people. And I think, obviously not everyone likes me, but a lot of people like me because I lead with authenticity. I'm not a taker, which is like, you have to go out and ask for money. And, that's a tough thing. It's like you ask for money. But I think also just my relationships, I tell people what I'm doing, the story, what I'm doing, and why. People can see that I'm passionate about what I'm doing,
Yep.
and it comes from the heart,
That,
and they want to help
totally.
you. I mean, I had a call with someone today who, works for one of the biggest sports agents in the world, and they have a fund. And, I got connected, and it wasn't about, I mean, of course you're like, hey, I would love for you to invest in my fund. Didn't even talk about that. Just like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I've built. And he already said, I'm going to connect you. He's like 4 people I'm going to connect you
Yeah.
to. And that's the
Yeah.
first time he met me. because I told the story and I led with like, my heart. And you have to be authentic. You have to be passionate about what you're doing. I'll never change. Like, I just don't think I'm never going to be that kind of aggressive person. Invest in my fun. Like, when I
Yes.
first meet someone, I'll tell them what I'm doing and get them excited and tell them about how big this is, the growth, and get them excited. And and so when I tell people what I'm doing, what I'm building, they want to help. And, obviously not everyone, but that's been really, really great.
I think this is why, I mean, again, I can firsthand say all these things too. Like when we go to these fundraisers, there are GPs who like are LP sharks. They're like, "Are you an investor? Are you?" And like, that's not your vibe. That's not my vibe at all. And then I remember the dinner, and I can't remember what when you told me your story. I was the same thing. I was like, "Oh my god, you have to meet my friend Ali Overholt." Like,
Yes.
do not bring
Yeah.
advisor, ex
Yeah.
ESPN, editor in chief of ESPNW, founding editor in chief of ESPNW, ESPN the magazine, produced the ESPYS. Like I was like, you told me your story. I was like, oh my god, you have to meet this person. So I totally get that, and I think that does come from. And I don't know. We probably spoke like half a glass of wine at that point, but I was just like, here's my Rolodex, please talk to these people. I have no money for you because I would give it to you if I had any money on my own right now that wasn't sunk in the
But I
side.
felt the same way about you. I just thought I love what you were doing in terms of working with your founders and your background, and just also the snowboarding, which we still haven't gone. You have invited me, but the timing was off, but we have to go out to, what is it called in Jersey? Jersey. I'm forgetting the name of
Big
it.
snow. I mean, you're a Jersey
Yeah.
girl. You're
Right, yeah.
half half
But the
Jersey.
indoor,
Yeah, big snow.
yeah, we have to go. But
Sure.
that was really cool. I mean, I think, here's the thing. You bring your whole person to, I think you told me about what you were doing and snowboarding, and just was really cool. And how you work with founders, I just loved it. And so, look, not everyone's gonna like what we do, or like will be sold on what we're doing, but I think you lead with being authentic, you have a vision, and you stay true to it. And, it's so interesting. It's like I'm seeing fund managers or GPs who have existing funds, and now they're saying, we invest in women's sports. And that wasn't what their fund was built on. But now it's like, oh, because now women's sports is a thing, they're changing their thesis, or now like, opening the aperture. But here's the thing, people are authentic. Like I was beating the women's sports drum for three years. And
Mhm.
people literally said to me, people don't watch women's sports. And I knew that that was not the case,
Yep.
because I go to women WNBA games. I go to the NSSL matches. And you know what happened? I've been going for years. When I live in DC, I worked at a big global law firm. I would go, the arena was like 2 blocks from my apartment, and I'm walking, I'm like, oh, there's a game. I would buy tickets for $5. And I would go, and the stadium, the arena was half full. It was all women. Now you go WNBA, even not even, well, now obviously, but even a few years ago, you go and you know what happened? You saw its fathers with their sons, and the sons are wearing jerseys. So remember, let's go back to when I went to the first Yankees game. I'm a Yankees fan forever. Those little boys are going to probably be, New York Liberty fans for life. And you know what? They're going to take their kids. And so that was a cultural shift that I saw that was happening in women's sports. So that means that more money is going to go into women's sports, is becoming a bigger business. And I saw that like 4 years ago.
Does it bother you that everyone? I mean, this is why I open with like when you described your thesis. Like, if people didn't know you, they'd be like, "Oh my god, that's so cherry picking." It's almost like you might as well just throw hardware and fintech on top too, just to like like chase where money's going. But it's like, no, 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 no. That is not. I mean, if you like, how do you both welcome all I mean, in one hand, it's really great that everyone wants to be part of this, right? Because it helps more money for our portfolio companies. At the same time, I think you've earned the right, for sure, as an outsider, I'll say, like, to have that mantle. Like, how do you balance that in terms of like feeling like getting credit for all those $5 tickets that you bought and the time that you put in? Or you know what? Does it just work itself out in the wash?
It works itself out in the wash. It just shows, we started this point out is like, I didn't just jump on a bandwagon. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not jumping on a bandwagon. And there are people who are jumping on bandwagons.
Right.
And so I think, you know, I think a great investor is someone who back to like they see where the ball is headed before other people see the ball, where the ball's headed, or they don't have a blind spot, and they have conviction on what they're doing, right? And conviction on how they see the world. And so because I went and I bought those $5 tickets and I went to the arena when, it was like half empty, but I was a lover. I love the basketball and I would go. But being an observer, I was also seeing how things were changing. And because I've been going to these things, so if I saw an opportunity. And so that's really, I mean, that's really it. I don't think I'm not expecting like a reward in return because you know, was doing this before, but it just reinforces my belief in that we're in early innings of women's sports. I selected AI data analytics. I'm an investor in Aura. Aura is an analytics company. Look how much it's grown. Over 3 million rings have been sold. You know, analytics used for sports recovery, preventing injuries, performance, predictor, like all these things. Like, and it's, people are using these things. Creator economy is just growing. And so all these things, it's like it's rooted in data, it's rooted in growth markets. It's not like I'm arbitrarily picking these things. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Like, and I like, look, I've done sports investments. We've talked about different sports investments I've made, and although we have different fan allegiances, like I'm definitely a huge sport. What would you say to someone? What do you think is misunderstood about sports investing? Where people are like, it's not important, it's not changing the fabric. Like, what do you think is so important about sports? What would you say to the naysayers that are less erudite about investing in this area, or even supporting, not even investing?
Yeah, no, I mean, sports is a huge market, like massive market. In the United States, it's a half a $500 billion market, only growing. Globally, it's a massive market. Media entertainment is like a $2.5 trillion market. So what I would say is these are big markets. Sports, there's a lot of people who are sports fan who watch sports. Let's just go to the NCAA March Madness, right? People have their brackets. They're watching sports, men and women, and it's a fabric of our society. And it's back to like when I went to my first baseball game, it brings people together. It shapes culture, all these things. And so there's money to be made in it. When you look at like, let's take the NFL, for example, you know, granted the valuations of these teams is rising like 6 billion and over, just from the media rights, each team, you know, they get basically $400 million per season just for their each team for the media rights. So these are huge businesses. And that's why private equity is getting into it now. NFL now allows private equity to invest. And so, we know private equity doesn't invest unless there's money to be made. So what I would say is, and it's sports is not for everyone, but these are big businesses. They're only growing. There's going to be some interesting opportunities like emerging and niche leagues. I was just at the TGL match like a month and a half ago. That's the new indoor golf league launched by Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy. I got to take a tour of the arena, state of the art, they're trying to attract different golf fans. It's like you've got a DJ. It's like music clips. Like the golfers have a mic clip, so you hear them talking to their caddy and talking to each other, and like it's just interesting, right? And these are like emerging leagues. Love the League One volleyball league, which she raised a ton of money for that. You've got these emerging and niche leagues. You also have hospitality where you have companies where you're like, hey, you want to go to Super Bowl? You go to Super Bowl. You go be able to go in the locker room. So building businesses around like hospitality, sports, so people who have a lot of money can do that, or companies that want to you know reward their top sales performers. But so all these different things are happening. So sports is a big industry, and there's a lot of components of it.
Yeah. And, and I also think about as you're describing everything, and I'll bring snowboarding in. I was at a snowboarding event. The way you describe is really a fragmentation of all the different aspects, ranging from you have your PGA tour to listening
Yeah.
to the caddy speak, or you're an investor in a USL team, right? A women's USL team. there, we were having this discussion with a bunch of other snowboarders this past weekend, and it was just like, if you're a competition snowboarder, like there's more ways than now to ever be a competitive snowboarder and be or skier and make a living. And I think it's funny when I was hearing you talk about all the different things, all I thought was like all the different people part of the world who are just fans and watching. And what I think, to take the money out, I don't know how this
Yeah.
hits me,
Yeah.
to noble this mission. Like sports, it's about access. It's like allowing access to dreaming, right? And I think about all the different fans that now get to experience golf for the first time that would never go to, I mean, the Masters is later, never go to Augusta, right? And or
Yeah.
people who, I don't know. It's the part that I struggle with as an investor, and I do have kind of a social impact aspect to what I invest. Not kind of, but I want to find a place for sports. And it's not out of just trying to shoehorn something. It's because I actually philosophically believe that I think sports make people better. Right. And I don't know, like there's something in there to that. I do a lot of disability investing. And one of the insights we had is that, for instance, running prosthetics are considered elective and not covered, because the thesis is running is a luxury. And I'm like, BS. Running is not a
Yeah.
luxury. Sports are not a luxury. Playing ball at Rucker, I mean, I can't play ball at Rucker, but like the
But if you
opportunity,
did, but
when you think
if you
about playing
could,
ball at
if
Rucker
you
or
could,
West Fork, is not a luxury. Like
yeah.
anyone should have access, and anyone does have access to be part of that culture. Even I've gotten to like watch games there, or sat at the gauge at West Fourth and watch games.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like that is, I don't know. I'm on my high horse. I'm just curious if you have reactions. Like I just think it's fundamental to
Yeah,
who you are.
I think yeah, I mean it's a fabric of our it's a fabric of our culture. Obviously not everyone is into sports, but I do think, I mean for me growing up, it shaped me as a person. It taught me how to lose a game and you come back the next day, you practice and you get ready for the next one, and that's like in the rearview mirror. So it taught me resiliency. It taught me teamwork. I had a team and, didn't like everyone, but we were really coming together to win. It taught me time management. I had to, balance practice, going to games, going to meets. When I ran track, the meets were like hours long. But you want to hear something cool? I
Yeah,
ran the 400-meter hurdles. That was the first event. So I would go sit in the stands and do my homework. But sometimes they would pull me in and do the 400-meter relay. And that was like one of the last
that's fun.
events. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I want to like do my homework. And I'm like, I'm not going to sit and I'm like thinking about the race. So, but you make time management, you figure it out. And I did well. I was National Honor Society, got into Brown, went to Brown, and it was because I had to use time management. I had to be disciplined. And, interesting fact, Deloitte did a study, and they said basically, I think it's something like 92% of women who were CEOs or leaders, startup leaders or leaders who've done well, all played sports.
No, it doesn't shock me. It shocks me
So,
zero.
I
I almost,
mean,
yeah.
it's and for some of these, in Harlem, I see kids playing. You know what? It's great they're playing basketball instead of like running around in the streets, keeping them out of trouble. And maybe one of them is going to make it big, right? And so, and in some cases, some of these athletes, their first one to go to college, they play sports, they make money, they can pull their family out of poverty. So, look, to play sports and to be good at it, you have to have discipline. It's all these characteristics that I think a lot of people view as like, and so
Yeah, and I can totally see how this impacts you as an investor. I'm glad we got a chance to fill in the gaps, and that informs also why I've always been just drawn to you, and like you're the first person, one of the first people I find when we're at one of those like cocktails, like, oh, I don't want to be here either. It's like, oh, I was like, okay, there's Lorine.
whenever I see you, it's a bright spot. It's always like I love seeing you. So yeah, you're amazing.
No, likewise. Just to keep this and thank you for, and listeners, thank you for following along as we went through this. Let's bring this back to 125 Ventures and kind of like sharpen our lens on the last half of this show here about like what you have coming ahead. Like, what are you most excited about? Um, as you sort of push 125 into being for the rest of 25 and beyond.
Yeah. So, working towards getting to close, and I've been seeing some amazing deals. So ready to, just put money to work and invest in some great companies. Also, as I mentioned, launching the women's team, Rhode Island Football Club, the women's team. Really excited about that. If you think about soccer, or football that they call it
I'm a
outside of the
footballer,
US.
so for sure,
Okay.
football.
Outside of the US, it's called football. We're going to host the World Cup in 2026. We've got the Olympics, LA Olympics. Just soccer is just really growing in the United States. It's taken off. And so see really tremendous opportunities. And frankly, women soccer players do much better than male soccer players in the United States. And so they've won 4 World Cups. We're going to just, build on that. It's really a development league to, develop an NSSL, same division. Who knows? Maybe one day they'll merge, but really picking up steam. And to just put in context, I believe there's something like 23,000 women who play in the NCAA soccer in the United States. Last year, only 37 were recruited or drafted in NSSL. So what that shows you is there's a lot of supply of players and not enough places for them to play. And so, I just think it'll be great. And in terms of like impact in society, like, giving these women who've trained and played an opportunity to go pro and to maybe then, get called up to NSSL or go play in Europe or something. And so, and that's frankly why I didn't pursue playing sports when I was after high school, because there's no future for me. So I focus on my academics. And it's great now that young girls can now look up and see, you know, great athletes like Kristen Press, all these other soccer players who are, doing well and can make money and can get endorsements and have a career like men. So that's what I'm excited about. The other thing I'm launching, I think I have a really unique POV, being a former media entertainment lawyer, understanding what's happening in terms of legal regulations, and then also been a tech investor for 11 years. I'm creating a podcast, so like what you're doing with a friend of mine, Delphine O'Rourke. She's an investor as well, but a focus on femtech or women's health, and also a lawyer. And we're going to create a podcast about innovation and beyond, but with our point of view, something like My First Million, but from a women's perspective. So that's a big business podcast, and 2 entrepreneurs who host it, but just definitely, similar topics, but a women's POV, but about business for sure. And then I'm launching a newsletter, Power Players, which will talk about the deals that are happening in sports media entertainment, the players, the trends that are happening. And so, yeah, so I'm really excited about that. And really, I've got a couple of speaking engagements coming up around, sports media entertainment, definitely becoming a thought leader in the space. People are reaching out to me to talk about women's sports and the intersection of sports media entertainment. So, which is great.
Your LinkedIn exhausts me. See, I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm like doing stuff. I'm like, Lorine is out there. Keep us posted on the pod for, the dozens of subscribers that we have here. We'll definitely follow up with links to the pod, your newsletter as well, and update that in the comments. So please have a look at that. And whenever that comes out, even if it, comes out much later, we'll still update the show notes to make sure that people know how to find you. Maybe 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 this is a good thing to just find out. It's like, what do you want people to know, and how do people want to reach out to you? What's the best way you like to try to connect with people if they want to get to know Lorine a little better?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn.
Yes,
I'm pretty
yes,
active. I post the things that I'm doing, speaking, or, interesting my POV about things. So you can certainly find me there, but then also, my email is Lorine at 125ventures.vc. So you can shoot me an email there. Also, you can go to our website, 125ventures.vc. We have a form you can fill out if you want to contact me. But yeah, I'm pretty accessible. Doing a lot like fundraising. So, it may take me a day or two to get back to you right away. But yeah, but I'm all for, I get, a lot, as I'm sure you do, a lot of people reaching out to you to look at companies, investors. So I welcome that. But those are the ways you can get in touch with me.
Awesome. Well, listen, Lorine, it has been such an honor. I'm so glad this is the most we've gotten to just sit down me and you. And I consider myself blessed for that time. And thank you so much for coming by the pod and making time out of your busy day to talk with us. It's really been an honor, and I'm looking forward to then having another. Well, I'm actually on an alcohol day, so like a glass of something.
Okay.
The
Yeah, we
next
could
time.
have coffee or tea or yeah. No, well, Mike, thank you so much for having me on your pod. I remember we met last summer and just really immediately clicked. And I'm glad we got to spend some time together. I know it's always like, hey, how are you at events, but this was really great. And what you're doing with this podcast featuring solo GPs, I think is really important. And yeah, you're creating community and I'm all for it.
Thank you. Thanks for being part of it. Well, I'm going to leave it there, folks. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Alone Together. I'm your host, Mike Ma, and we will see you next time. Thanks again, Lorine. Take care, everyone.